I think it's a horrific event. It's very sad at many levels. The route of violence, the route of killing, the route of physical attack is not the way of dialogue. In this context, we just wish him an early recovery, and we hope that he gets a complete recovery and that there is no recourse.
It's like abhi jaise in recent events, Lal Singh Chadda also did that, and people were boycotting the film. So boycott and cancel culture is also the part of it. And in the wake of Salman Rushdie, he was attacked yesterday. So I wanted to know what do you think about the whole incident?
I think it's a horrific event. It's very sad at many levels. He is a brilliant writer, a brilliant creator of imaginary worlds in which allow the human spirit to fly and soar. And he has been singularly responsible for giving a place in global literature to Indians writing in English. It's also horrible because, you know, the route of violence, the route of killing, the route of physical attack is not the way of dialogue, is not the way in the 21st century to solve your differences.
And will it affect the way people write? Like, does it threaten or make you apprehensive?
Well, you know, I think human expression is very difficult thing to curb and control. So I don't think the true expression can be stopped by threats.
And sir, because abhi hum baat kar rahe hain ki attacker was only 24. So do you think ki youngsters who are so much consumed by the hatred, what do you think about this?
I think it's a sad development. It's a very sad development that a person who was not even born when the event happened, you know, it shows that hatred lives a long time. You know, it's sad. But so the age of the person is not important. What is important is the feeling of hate and violence and wanting to take, you know, wanting to settle differences with violence.
It's launched in Chandigarh, but other than that, you have launched it in Punjab anywhere else?
No, this was launched in Delhi, and now this is the event in Chandigarh. I was to have done an event in Amritsar, but last week, but I wasn't well, so I couldn't do that.
But is it important for you to?
I think it's very important.
The place itself, Jallianwala Bagh.
It's very important for me to bring it home to Punjab. Chandigarh is near enough. I do hope that in the future I'll also take it to Amritsar.
And sir, if you talk about the book, The Crimson Spring, right? So it's a novel, but it is very married to the historical events of Punjab, especially. So how did you ended up doing it in a fictional way?
Well, you know, it is a historical novel.
Yes.
So when you have both those elements, you have a historical element. You have the historical setting, you have the historical events which are not changed, and you have some historical characters. And then against that backdrop, you have an interplay of fictional characters who are governed by that time, who are in a sense, who are children of that time, who are also victims of that time. So, you know, every historical event is just not happening somewhere in some place. Every historical event has its repercussions on ordinary people, on you and me. So, this is a story of ordinary people acting out their lives in front of the historical backdrop.
And did any of the incident that happened back in that time left an imprint on you, like knowing from your parents or grandfather?
Well, it's not a personal thing in that sense, because none of my family were involved at that time in that place. But yes, my grandparents were involved in other incidents, other events that are shown in the book. For instance, the irrigation department, which was taking canals to new parts. My grandfather for a time worked in that department, so I had heard about that. My grandmother was involved in the aftermath of the Gurdwara reform movement, when the people used to go for the morchas in a non-violent manner. They'd be beaten up by lathis by the British police, and they would come back, and the women would sort of bandage them and put medicine, and that, so she was doing a bit part of that. So these are things which one has heard. But again, it doesn't have to be your own family. You've heard so much from people around you that it goes deep inside you as a Punjabi.
And sir, because today we are talking about freedom of expression and freedom of speech, and somewhere there's also a writer's responsibility. And coming to think of it, like in history, when we are talking about historical novel, or maybe somebody's biography, or any religious रिलीजियस सिग्निफिकेंस के लिए कुछ भी, तो उसमें डू यू फील कि देयर इज अ रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी ऑफ द राइटर टू बी मतलब रीजनेबल एंड इनफ दैट रीडर्स हाउ रीडर्स गोना इंटरप्रेट इट?
Well, you as I said, the writer's responsibility, if he is touching history, is to be true to history. That is his responsibility. He cannot change history to say that, oh, so and so will not like it, so and so will not like it. He has to write either he doesn't write history, he writes pure fiction, then he can do whatever he wants. But if he is writing history and he is talking about actual historical characters, I, as a writer, believe strongly that those are sacred facts. You can't change those. You can create facts around them. You can create facts in the gaps. You can create internal lives that, oh, so and so must have thought this, because nobody knows what he thought. But you can't change what you know as history. That is your primary responsibility. And this I've tried to explain in the prologue to the book also, so that people know what is history and what is fiction.
And how do you end up like building on the idea that which subject you're going to take next?
Well, it's a very complex process. I think every writer comes to that on his own. There are some things which haunt you. There are some things which obsess you. There are some things which you simply have to write about, and the stories begin to keep, they keep eating at you until you get rid of them.
And was this subject one of those?
Many of the subjects here were those. I wanted to write about Jallianwala Bagh. I wanted to write about the soldiers who went from Punjab. I wanted to write about the Ghadar revolutionaries. But so, instead of trying to write separate books on each one of them, I've tried to package them all in one narrative.
Again, Jallianwala Bagh, it is a huge, maybe like ऐसा massacre है जो कि हम कभी भुला भी नहीं सकते. But then we, as Sikhs and everybody in India, we moved on from it, but we kept that in mind, that what happened. So, forgetting the hatred, and then how much is the relevance of this book today? Because we are living in the same times, I feel.
I think it's relevant because firstly, the massacre itself, it's 100 years, but you see people have not forgotten it.
Yes.
You and I are still talking about it, because it is one of the worst expressions of colonial brutality anywhere in the world, and certainly in India. And it's important that we don't forget it. I'm not saying that we should all get together and get violent about it or seek revenge about it, but we should know that what happened in our freedom struggle, what is the cost that we paid for the freedom that we are celebrating 75 years of this week, how many people lost their lives, how many innocent people's lives were destroyed in the process. And that's why perhaps we will value our freedom more, perhaps we will value our history more. Perhaps we will value the ordinary men and women who gave everything in their lives, the young revolutionaries who were hanged at 18, 19, 20. A man like Udham Singh, who took 20 years to chase Michael O'Dwyer and spent his whole life in that chase. the men and women who, who gave up everything and contributed to the First World War and then got nothing in return. So I hope this book will serve the purpose of telling us that history is not something in a laboratory. History is not something on a pedestal far away. History is something which hits every ordinary person.
And as Indians, do you feel we are ignorant than the West? Because we somehow, like we talked about Jallianwala Bagh, so now there's a whole revamped memoriam there and there's light shows going on there. So do you think that we we don't respect our history the way we should?
I can't generalize about an entire people, but I think, so I don't want to criticize what we do or we don't do, but I do want to say that we do need to do more. We need to learn more about our past. We need to document more. We don't document enough. And we want, as far as the memorial is concerned, we should make sure that it does not lose its starkness, its simplicity. It should engender silence. It should engender in the visitor, it should engender introspection. It should not be a picnic spot.
And what do you expect as an author from the system, from the government, especially when we talk about even Salman Rushdie's case, his book was banned. Do you think that was the right decision?
Well, I think these were, 40 years ago, and there were, at every time there's a different time. These are very complicated issues. I don't want to get into that in this context. In this context, we just wish him an early recovery, and we hope that he gets a complete recovery, and that there is no recourse to such acts of hatred.
And any positive note for the authors in the society, because it's a dark time in a way?
Well, I think the writers in every society, in every time, have a duty. They have a duty to their art, they have a duty to their skill, they have a duty to their conscience. So authors, poets, painters, sculptors, they respond to a time. They respond to a situation. And the more that they respond according to their own lights, according to their own inner voices, the truer they will be.
And sir, have you thought of doing a translation of this in Punjabi? Your father was a writer in Punjabi.
Yes, but I don't have the capacity or the skill. I have translated from Punjabi to English.
Yes.
I don't have the capacity to translate my own book into Punjabi. I do hope it finds a good translator.
Yes. And sir, how do you feel about the Sikh stories coming in forefront, like in Lal Singh Chadda, and then Udham Singh came last year?
I have not seen Lal Singh Chadda. I have seen Shaheed Udham. I think it was important that a movie was made on him. It's not entirely true to history, yes, but they do put a disclaimer which is in very, very small print. You can't read it. It comes and goes.
Just a personal thing, what do you think of the scene that was shot on Jallianwala Bagh?
I think Udham Singh's presence there was overdone.
Yes.
He was never there, according to my book, yes, and according to his own statement.
But the aftermath they have shown, right?
Yeah.
It was never shown the way it should have been.
Well, I think you can quibble a lot, but they have taken artistic license and they have made their choices. Everybody makes their own choices. I have made my own.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes,